Okay. Well, thanks to those who come, and we'll be able to, bring other folks in as they join us. I want to welcome Dr. Nabinita Majumdar. She's a program director at Willow Tree. In her role, she's responsible for supporting various clients with their digital transformation journey. Before Willow Tree, she played an active role in the Agile transformation in Capital One, where she also earned her certification on Scaled Agile framework. Nabinita has project management experience in various industries, including semiconductors, financial institutions, and healthcare, all very impressive. Nabinita grew up in eastern regions of India and has come to the University of Virginia to pursue a PhD in engineering. Since then, she's been in the Charlottesville and Richmond area, lives with her husband, who's a UVA professor, and 2 boys, one of which is a freshman at UVA, and the other one is a middle schooler. She enjoys traveling, hiking, and community service in her leisure time. Before you start telling us about all of this great program direction and management things, Nabinita, do you have a favorite hiking trail in the area?
Yeah, love going to the Humpback Mountain and seeing the view from the top, especially during the fall. It's beautiful. I would love to go there during sunrise as well, which is on my list. Just couldn't figure out the time so that it's not too dark and I can still go there and see the sunrise. So that's still on my list, but love going to the Humpback Mountain, and the fall view is excellent.
Yeah, that's a favorite. That was one of the first ones we did when we moved to the area too. I wholeheartedly agree. So I'm going to let you share your screen. I'll mute, and folks should feel comfortable putting questions in chat if you have any. We'll kind of monitor that along the way.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa, for giving me this opportunity to speak to a great community of women in technology. I have attended some of the meetings in person before pandemic, and I'm looking forward to meeting all of you again after pandemic, or as soon as we can come back to the office. I was talking to one of our executives today, and he thought that we'll be having this meeting in person here. I said, not yet, but hopefully one day, hopefully soon, we'll be able to bring everyone back to the Willow Tree office and have this meeting in person. So with that, I know it's virtual meeting can be a little challenging sometimes, especially for a conversation like project and program management, which is basically an experience that we build, and we learn from each other's experience by sharing experience. So I would really appreciate if you guys can raise your hand or drop a line on chat as I'm going through the topic. And I have intentionally, I've created some breakpoints to stop and look through the chat, as well as look for any reaction from you all regarding questions. If there's any experience that you want to share related to the topic, please feel free to do that. I would definitely love it to be more of a dialogue and conversational than just me talking to you one way. With that, I would start sharing my screen.
It's coming across beautifully.
Thank you. Yeah, and if there's any problem with the sound, please feel free to let me know, and yeah, we will adjust that. All right. So project and program management both are, different topics, and both are huge topics. So it's definitely hard to do a deep dive on each of these within an hour, but I have arranged it in a way that we should be able to we all should be able to take some messages home from this meeting and apply to our day-to-day work, especially if you are an IT professional and work with software. There will be definitely certain messages that you can take away from this talk. This is geared towards anyone working in software organization with or without any experience. I have also tried to make it light and conversational so that it doesn't feel like you all will fall back to sleep. I know it has been a long day for all of us. So please feel free to, enjoy these and share your reactions. I will be sharing some real life examples, experiences. I will not be able to share name of my client. Unfortunately, those are confidential, but all of this experience is based on the work I have done so far. And then feel free to ask questions at any time or raise hands. It'll be lovely to, talk through some of these. Well, with that, we'll move on to our next slide. Is it readable for all of you? I hope it's not too small on your screen.
We're seeing the next slides off to the left, which might make it a little bit smaller. I know in the testing you had gone to the, I think, presentation mode or one of the other views that might make it a bit bigger.
Yeah, let me go into the slideshow. Okay, is this better?
I think it probably is for folks. People can certainly disagree in the chat.
Perfect. All right. Okay. So the agenda in general today is I'll be giving an overview of what project, program, and portfolio management is. We'll not get into the portfolio management today. We'll be focusing on project and program management. The very important principle of project management is called project management triangle. So we'll spend some time on that, and we'll be using that in our examples and case studies today. We'll be doing a deep dive into scope, timeline, and team management and different ways we apply various tools to do that for project and program. We'll talk about the communication tools and needs that is applied for each of these, whether it's project or program. It does vary, but communication is the key, whether it's between teams or with stakeholders or vendors. Communication is the critical tool. We'll be talking about the risk and dependency management and various tools used. And then we'll talk about a little bit of stakeholder management. Again, we're not going to deep dive on any of these topics, but at least you will know what it is and what the principles are for doing or applying these techniques. And then finally, we'll go into 2 case studies, one for project management, one for program management. With that, let's move on to the next slide. So project, program, and portfolio management, what are they? So at the organization level, strategies are created at the beginning of fiscal year. Once the strategies are created, typically we talk about the strategic initiatives and then how these initiatives need to be executed during the timeline, which could be a year, could be multi-year, could be even 5-year. And then we create portfolios. Each portfolio will have either one or multiple, can have multiple strategic initiatives within the portfolio. And each portfolio will then have multiple programs. These programs are actually a group of projects that are interconnected to deliver the objective of the program. So from portfolio, we get down to the multiple programs, and then each program will have multiple projects, and each project typically has a single initiative and will have a goal that's specifically for that particular project. Program definitely has a larger goal, a strategic goal sometimes, and it works on the outcome rather than just single deliverables. But the projects under the program are helping the program to deliver that objective or outcome. So these projects are typically connected to help the program deliver its objective or benefits. Any question here on the slide? Please feel free to raise hand. All right, we'll move on to the next slide. So what does a project manager do? What it is a day in life of a project manager. So a project manager will typically initiate and plan for a project. They are also responsible for managing the budget and timeline. Their day-to-day responsibility is to monitor the progress of the project and report the progress to the stakeholders, customers, or even sometimes to the team, basically whoever will benefit from this progress update. Project manager also manages risk for the project. Project manager is responsible for managing stakeholders. And then, as I mentioned, typically they have a very well-defined scope. So the project manager will need to monitor the scope and will need to deliver the scope within the certain timeline. So now that we know what a project manager does, what does a program manager do? Again, program manager is someone who is responsible for delivering a whole entire program. So as I said, the program consists of multiple projects. The responsibility for the program manager is to run the program to deliver the outcome. Here is the difference. The project has a deliverable, but a program has an outcome. So program needs to make sure that outcome is delivered. And typically the inputs will come from each project by successfully completing each project. A program manager also needs to manage risks and dependencies across multiple projects, sometimes even external to these projects and external to this program. Program manager also engages with stakeholders regularly, makes sure stakeholders are being updated about progress, as well as any impediments or any roadblock along the delivery path of the program. A program manager also works on helping the teams make decisions. So there are many decisions that needs to be made to make sure the program is on track, and program manager will actually work with the teams or stakeholders to make sure right artifacts are being used, right tools are being used to make those decisions. Sometimes it could be data-driven, facts-driven. Sometimes it could be simply consensus between teams to make that decision. But it's the responsibility of program manager to make sure there is an environment that's safe for every team to voice their input, opinion, and help them make the decision. And then time to time, program manager also needs to refine the operating model. As I mentioned, that a program delivers an outcome and typically runs over multi-year, they need to make sure they are adjusting the operating model based on the outcome, based on the delivery, based on the progress of the program. So the program manager is always on the hook to make sure all these changes are being incorporated into the operating model. That could be adding teams, changing team resources, changing deliverable if the program deliverable has changed, etc. With this, before I dive into the next section, I'd like to take a quick break to see if there are a lot of chat items. Okay. Thanks. Adore the slide. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, Lori. Thanks, Lisa. Any question before we get into the deep dive on some of the principles of project and program management?
Okay, you have to be quiet now.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we do have one question. I'm thinking if I should hold on to that. I'll probably hold on to that question since you may see an answer, although I'm not specifically mentioning about technical writer, but your answer may get resolved. But if not, we will revisit this at the end. Any other question?
I got it.
A very good question, though. All right, let's move on to the next slide, and then we'll come back to the chat after another section. Okay, if there's one slide that I would like you all to remember from this talk, this is the slide, because this is what project managers live and breathe every day. This is the triangle called project management triangle that's used to make decisions, help justify adjustment to the project, as well as help support the workload on the team. So as a project manager, we are always looking at this particular triangle, which has got quality at the center, time as one of the main key, cost or resources or budget, whichever way you want to define, as the second end of the triangle, and scope as the third end of the triangle. So scope, time, cost, these are the three key points for this triangle, and these are the three endpoints that we are always juggling to make sure our project is on track. Quality is at the center. We don't want to compromise the quality. So while juggling these three, we also want to make sure that we are not compromising quality. If this is what we are using for managing project, think about a program. A program has got multiple projects under its umbrella. So I like this quote. So if project management is like juggling three balls, time, cost, and quality, program management is like a troupe of circus performers standing in a circle and each juggling three balls, and then also swapping balls from time to time, because these projects are also dependent on each other. So this is how each project manager manages a project, and this is how project manager provides input to the program. And at the end of the day, program management makes decisions based on these three key facts or factors of project. And typically what happens is if one of this is changing, such as, scope gets increased, then we'll have to adjust one of the other two. Either we increase the timeline, or if we want to keep the timeline as a constant, then we increase the cost by adding resources. So these three are tied together, and you cannot expect that one will change and other two will not change, because that is just not sustainable. And you will be sacrificing on quality, you will be sacrificing on your team morale, on your, the whole triangle will basically then collapse. So just remember that if one of this needs to be expanded or shrunk, so sometimes we do get requests that timeline needs to be shortened. So if this is shortening, then we'll have to reduce the scope. Or if we are keeping the scope, then we have to add more resources, and that will change the cost. So that's how we always arrange or adjust our project, and we bring it up when we're discussing with our stakeholders or with our team. We are actually referencing to this particular triangle and helping everyone see how we are making decisions about the project. Is there a raised hand? No. Okay. All right. So we'll move on to the next section, which is the scope management. As I said, that we'll be diving into each of these points. So scope is something that's defined at the very beginning of a project. And a single project always focuses on a defined scope. Typically, a project will run for 6 months to a year, and will execute on this defined scope. The scope is defined by help from stakeholders, product owner. If there's a business owner, of course, business owner and product owner work together. And then tech lead also provides input to make sure everything is in sync in terms of scope. And as I mentioned, that the scope is managed typically by pulling one of the levers of the PM triangle. For program though, since program focuses on an outcome, it's not so straightforward. So program scope is determined with inputs from business stakeholders and product managers. But then when this scope changes, scope creep can impact more than one teams or more than one projects, because multiple projects are typically helping to deliver that scope. So if the scope changes, we normally see an impact on the deliverables of multiple teams, and the timeline impact is also higher. Timeline management, as I said, that delivery timeline is always built based on individual project. For project management, can be adjusted by adjusting resources or scope, and it's typically fixed and short-term for projects. Program management delivery timeline is actually built based on inputs from multiple projects. So changes in one project timeline will impact timeline for other projects. And we have seen that often program needs to go back and rebaseline their timeline based on the adjusted scope or adjusted progress from different teams. So program baselining is more common than a project needing to change. And as I mentioned, programs typically run multi-year, and that also explains why rebaseline is often needed. The third end of the triangle is the team management. I think we mentioned resource or cost. In software delivery, cost is primarily associated with the people. So team is a key factor on these. For managing teams, there are different methodologies available for project management, and which is also a core for program management. Is it could be either Waterfall or Agile, and within Agile, it could be Scrum or Kanban. There are different ceremonies such as daily stand-up, refinement, retrospective, sprint demo, and then communication within the team is a key to success. And similarly, team model and health needs to be maintained to make sure project is successful. For program, it's a larger umbrella. So typically the methodology that is used here is different. There is SAFe or Scaled Agile framework. There's large scale Scrum, that's Scrum being applied to a large number of teams. And then there's also a framework called Team of Teams. We'll go into a couple of the framework today, not all of them, but if you're interested, you can definitely look up on web. Team ceremonies and program level ceremonies are for program are different. There's Scrum of Scrum, system demo, inspect and adapt. Again, I think we have a slide to talk a little bit more about that. And then, of course, communications between teams is crucial because if the teams are not talking, then the entire program will fail. Even the project can be very successful. It's just this being siloed in a program is very, very painful and very, very costly. So communications between teams is really, really crucial for a program management. And then team model and health is actually often impacted by overall program health. It's no longer dependent on just the project or just the team, because they are dependent on other teams. They're dependent on overall delivery. And if one of those is not working, it impacts the individual team's morale. Here's a quick slide to mention about Waterfall versus Agile. So Waterfall is a technique where we wait for each phase to be completed before starting the next phase. So basically you deliver all the work at the end at one time, where Agile is more of quicker cycle where we are doing design, development, test, and roll out to get feedback fast, and then change our process to improve and move on to the next feature. So rather than delivering everything at the end, we actually deliver in slices. We deliver small portions, but we improve continuously as we do so. And each of these has got pros and cons. Most organizations have moved into Agile because of the faster cycle and continuous improvement that's possible. Having said that, I also know there are organizations like healthcare or some financial institutes who absolutely need to depend on Waterfall methodology. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's up to the team to decide what works for the team. If Waterfall works, they should just follow that. If Agile works better, then they should follow Agile. I have also seen teams following a mix of Waterfall and Agile. They joke and say it's Wagile, but I have seen that to work for them too. So it's just an adjustment of process that works for the team to deliver value for the customers. So Scrum is actually a subset of Agile methodology. There are two popular Agile methodology, Scrum and Kanban. Scrum is more common in software development. Kanban is becoming more and more common as well these days. So for Scrum, there's a Scrum Master who typically leads all the ceremonies, makes sure the team is executing the scope. So Scrum Master is basically very similar to the project manager, and manages all the deliverables, etc., for the team. And then there's product owner who basically works with Scrum Master and team to deliver product to the customer. There's a product backlog, which is typically, decomposed into sprint backlog during sprint planning session. Sprint consists of 1 to 4 weeks. I have worked on 2 weeks mostly, and I do think that's the most successful, but every organization is different, and again, it can be adjusted based on the team's need. Daily stand-up is a key ceremony. That's the way team communicates with each other. That's the way team communicates with Scrum Master, product owner, and makes sure any impediment is visible and transparent. And then sprint review and sprint retro happens at the end of the sprint to help the team continuously improve on their performance. And of course, at the end of the sprint, they deliver the finished work. And again, finished work doesn't need to be the entire product, but maybe a subset of that product or feature, whatever makes sense for that project team. Move on to the program management framework, and one of the most popular program management framework is SAFe. There is a whole organization and curriculum. You can get certified for different SAFe roles. I'll share the slides, and I've mentioned the Scaled Agile Framework website where you can get a lot more information. But basically what SAFe is, it's an alignment of product vision, product backlog, and team being able to deliver that work within a certain timeline. So that's what SAFe does, this framework does, but then obviously, along with planning, SAFe helps in delivering that plan as well. So the people in SAFe is at the ground level, it's product owner, Scrum Master, and team. So these are the agile teams. And then at the program level, there is product management, who basically gives the requirement and represents the business. There's a program manager, often called RTE, a release train engineer. And then there's a representative from technology side, who could be an SE, system engineering, or an architect who has a good understanding of the technology at the program level. And then, of course, all of this is being sponsored by the business owners. And again, this particular slide represents one version of SAFe, which is called Essential, but then there are multiple other versions of SAFe, and there are multiple layers of SAFe, depending on how big your organization is. Some key vocabulary that is typically used in SAFe is program backlog, which is basically the backlog or requirements provided by the business owner and product manager. And those are then broken into features that will feed the team backlogs that then team will be executing on. PI planning is the ceremony where all of the work is planned. PI objective is something that is formed based on the program backlog and ordered by priorities. So there will be priorities, very clear priorities assigned to these PI objectives, and the program will be asked to deliver based on those priorities. Each team will follow their own ceremonies, but there are also some additional ceremonies that help the program to stay in sync and deliver. System demo is something that happens typically at the end, right before release, but that gives the entire program visibility to all the work that's going on, as well as can provide feedback to the teams. So typically business owner will be present during the system demos and will provide feedback to the teams. We already talked about IP. So IP iteration is basically the sprint. Each sprint in PI methodology, it's known as iteration. There are also a lot of additional support teams available in the program. DevOps is one. Architecture team who provides this vision of architectural runway is another team. And I'm not seeing it listed here, but there's the support teams, which is actually that could be part of DevOps, who actually helps with the release on demand or release maintained. They help in maintaining the release pipeline, basically. Any question on SAFe framework? Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. So we talked about scope management, time management, timeline management, and team or resource management. The other pillar of managing projects and program both is communications. Communication is the key to success. It can it will help the teams to succeed or fail. So we need to make sure that team internally is communicating well, but at the program level, we also need to make sure that multiple teams are communicating with each other well. So inter-team communication in a timely manner is critical. Various channels for communication is that planning. So PI planning, as I mentioned, for SAFe happens at the beginning of a program increment, and it typically runs for 2 days, where all developers from all teams will participate, along with the business owner, stakeholders, architects, basically everyone who has a stake on this program will be present for 2 days. So this helps in planning at the high level as well as at the detailed level possible. This also helps in bringing up any risk and making sure that we have a plan to mitigate those risks. This also helps in scope negotiation with the stakeholders or business owner, and then establishing a realistic timeline based on those conversations. Once the planning is done, the team starts executing on their backlog, but then in order to stay in sync, there is Scrum of Scrum, where all Scrum Masters meet to communicate their progress, challenges, as well as risk or dependencies. Typically twice a week, could be once a week too. There is also a PO sync, where product owners from each team will be syncing to discuss similarly. And then there's S3. S3 is basically a level up Scrum of Scrum, where typically the program lead and then anyone beyond program or outside program will meet to discuss all these challenges, roadblocks, impediments, and resolve that for this program. Already talked about the team ceremonies that happen sprintly, and then system demo happens once every program increment, and then inspect and adapt is basically very similar to the sprint review, but it happens at the end of program increment and helps with the review of the entire iteration, as well as retro, anything that can be better or needs to be better. And then along with this communication, there are various reports that track individual project metrics. That includes team velocity, completed versus remaining scope, etc. And then program reporting tracks overall program scope, velocity, risks, and dependency. Sorry, need to drink water. Here are some samples of reporting for project burn down. As I mentioned, it's typically a single project, so it's a simple tracking where you can show the ideal burn down for project scope versus actual progress for the project. And then for program, we typically represent multiple teams' progress. In this particular case, we are representing using feature work that is in the scope and feature work and the amount of work that has been complete. So anything that's in gray shows that that's remaining, and anything in purple are being tested, etc. So, and anything in green is done. So basically, a combined view of all teams' progress tells the program stakeholder how much work is actually remaining, and what dependency is still there. So I know I had to, this is actually a real report. I just had to change the features to generic features, but this provides a lot of value to the stakeholders when they are trying to assess how much work is still remaining and what the timeline is going to look like. Risk management framework, actually going back, any question up to this point? Haven't seen much, any messages on chat? Anyone raising hand? Okay, all right, we'll move on to the next section. Quick time check. Okay. Here's a risk management framework. Basically, whether you are managing project or program, in each case, you need to identify risks. We need to measure the impact of the risk. You can do it by assigning a numerical value or using low, medium, high rating. Each project, each team defines that, and it's more of a scaling rather than actual number. That's important here. Once you have identified risks and assigned a value to it, I think you can prioritize them, but also you need to manage them by making sure you are following the ROAM method, which is R for resolved, O for owned, A for accepted, and M for mitigated. So resolved means you can either, resolve the risk right away, or you can have someone to own the risk and drive it to resolution. You can also mitigate the risk by adding the necessary controls or taking necessary actions to counter effect the risk. Or sometimes, you and your stakeholder can accept the risk, because if that's something that's tolerable, it can be accepted. And then eventually it's monitored and reported throughout the project life cycle. For program, what we typically do, especially if we are following SEF, we follow these methods of identifying risks, and each team, after they identify them, they will also see which one is team-related risk and which one is program-related risk. Any program-related risk is actually discussed during the program increment planning, and an exercise similar to ROM is done. And as you say, all of these risks are created. We use Sticky a lot, so during PI planning, and then you bring it to one of these categories based on the discussions. But each team will have to represent their risk, their program level risk at this meeting, and then make sure that it's assigned in one of these categories. And then as the execution starts, we also monitor all of these risks, and basically the status can change, it can be resolved or mitigated, but monitoring is very important to make sure we are not missing anything. Dependency management is very complex for programs. So for SAFE, we typically have a program board, and when we used to meet in person, we used to use urns to connect between these milestones and dependencies, and show how they are connected. So this is obviously a fictitious board, but this red cards are significant dependency cards. Blue are the features or enablers, and then yellow is a milestone or event. Now, each of these, or not each, but some of these features can have dependencies. And when we create this program board and assign features to our sprints, we need to make sure all the dependent work is being complete before we are able to complete our feature work. So that's what this ERs or this diagram helps us in visualizing. If the red cards are not on the left side of the blue cards that are connected, you know that you are in trouble and you need to change that. So this is obviously done after some arrangement or rearrangement of the cards and discussions with the dependent teams, as well as sometimes discussion with the stakeholders or business owners in terms of resolving some of these dependencies. So this is always a fun discussion during PI planning, and it's a fun output from PI planning. Typically, after the PI planning, this board will be converted into a virtual board, and then it's maintained. And if the dependencies change, this will change, and this will also, show how the timeline is being impacted. Timeline or feature deliverable is being impacted. The last management tool here is the stakeholder management plan. So for both project and program, we need to manage our stakeholders. And this is a simple tool that you can use. Typically, we plot interest of our stakeholders on x-axis and power of our stakeholders to influence the project outcome as the y-axis. And then you figure out who has high interest but low power, or who has high interest and high power, and vice versa. And based on that, you decide how much effort you want to invest in managing that stakeholder. Obviously, anyone who has the high power to influence outcome, you should make sure you are paying attention to them. And then especially on anyone on this quadrant, the top right quadrant is we need to engage with them closely and influence actively, because they are heavily interested in this project and they also have high ability to influence. And then anyone on this top left, if they have high power to influence, but they don't have time or have that much interest in this project, then you just need to make sure that they are satisfied. So you provide them updates and information, but you don't need to spend a whole lot of time with them. And then in the lower section, you either monitor or keep informed depending on if someone who is highly interested, they just want information trickle down to them. So just make sure you're either consulting with them or keeping them informed. And then top left is more for monitoring purposes. So this helps in managing your time and effort to manage your stakeholders. And then, of course, as stakeholders change or their interests change, we need to revisit the plan and update the plan periodically. With this, we actually come to the end of this presentation with a couple of case studies. I think we have only 5 or 6 minutes left, so I'm going to skip the case studies for now and answer any more questions from you guys. Okay, so, okay, this is very helpful. Back to the dependency chart. I was wondering what the blue boxes represent that are not connected to another block. Great. So, sorry, I didn't mean to. But the blue boxes basically mean that these are the features that do not have dependencies. So you can independently execute them and commit to a delivery timeline. You'll not need to worry about, any work being completed prior to these features. I think there was one more question on chat regarding the technical writers. So, yeah, that's a very good question, and I think even I'm still trying to solve for that dependency. But what I've found out is that engaging them at the very beginning of project or program, so basically involving them during the inception or planning phase and helping them work with the teams to document these artifacts throughout is helpful. Often we see the opposite. We see that they are being engaged at the end of the project to document, and that's where I think the problem lies. We need to make sure that we are engaging our technical writers at the very beginning and keeping them in the loop throughout and supporting them to document throughout the process, throughout the delivery phase. Does that answer your question? Okay, great presentation. What project management software do we use? We use multiple different softwares, and because we are so client focused, we actually add up to whatever the client is using. So it could be Jira, could be Smartsheet, could be Excel, depending on, or even Microsoft products, depending on what they want. Okay, as we are approaching the end, I did want to share some of the job opportunities available in our organization. So we have got at least 2 project director roles, and then at least 3 program director roles. These are available in offices. They're not remote at this time. So project director roles are Durham and Charlottesville, and then program director roles are available in all 3 offices, Durham, Charlottesville, and Columbus. We also have 2 product manager roles available in Charlottesville. Product managers are more of, who create the requirements, build vision for products. So less execution oriented, but they do work with project and program directors to help our clients, deliver their products. And sometimes even product managers do need to work as project manager, depending on the available budget, etc. So we have some who are great in managing project and product both. So yeah, there are, I think, altogether 7 roles that are available in Willow Tree at this time. We are hiring big, so please feel free to apply. Please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. I will share the slides as well as drop my contact information so that you all can reach out.
Thank you so much for that amazing talk. I learned so much.
Help, get to know Siri at apple.com.
Sorry. Siri.
Thank you so much for all that great information. I learned a ton. I can only imagine that others did too. Please feel free, folks, if you have questions, pop them in the chat as we're kind of wrapping up here. Want to remind folks that we try to have events about once a month. We are working as Charlottesville Women in Tech to try to get back to in-person events when it is safe to do so consistently. We had announced that we were going to have a large membership event so that we can kind of welcome everyone, and we did need to postpone that from last month. So be watching the newsletters for that. Also in newsletters are some job opportunities from some of our great sponsors like Willow Tree, who has been an amazing partner throughout our time as an organization. So keep an eye out for that. Check out the positions that Nabinita mentioned, and we will have the link to the recording, and we'll have that in the newsletter, and we can, I think Katie can confirm this, but I think we can send out those slides to the attendees if you'd like us to do that too.
Yeah, that's perfectly all right. I will share the slides with you, and then the job opportunities as well. I will make sure, yeah, they are accessible, or you can add them to that newsletter as well. So
yeah, and they're out on our webpage too, Charlottesville Women in Tech, folks that are looking for positions. So yeah, lots of ways to get that information.
Yeah, and I'm on LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out to me as well directly on LinkedIn if you need more information about these roles. We understand that it's always good to hear from someone who is actually working on these roles. So please feel free to do so.
So true. Thank you for being gracious with that offer.
And thanks, Lisa, for inviting me to this event. And I'm looking forward to having some of this mostly in person, right? Hopefully.
Yes. I look forward to having a cup of coffee with you someday. Absolutely. Have a great evening, everyone. Bye.